Welcome, everybody. We will get started now with our webinar for this fourth quarter of 2024 here in December, right at the end of the year. Christmas is over. I hope everybody had a good Christmas in the middle of Hanukkah right now also. Hope everybody's having some good holiday season. Good New Year coming up, and what we're going to be talking about today is insurance, just in time for the new year. So I am Todd Orchide. I am the CEO of Revolution Rental Management. Here with me, we've got Zach. Zach, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hello, my name is Zach Chapman. I am a business development manager for Revolution and Todd, and I bring on new business, and I'm pretty good at it.
Yes, he is. We've had a pretty good month here in December, normally a slow month. So everything's going well here at Revolution. We've also got Tamara Brooks in the background. She's another one of our BDMs. Won't be on camera today, but she is here if she needs to provide any input. And our marketing manager, Mario, is also in the wings in case we need anything. So, but primarily me and Zach talking to everybody today, going over all of our insurance related stuff. So let me throw up a presentation real quick that we will go through, and then we'll kind of jump in and out of this presentation as we go along. Let me see here. All righty, here we go. So we are talking, like I said, about insurance. So welcome everybody here. We appreciate everybody jumping in, everybody who's watching on the recording. Also, we try to get this out to everybody on a recording afterwards, so that we've always got this information available on YouTube and for everywhere our clients and potential clients can see it. So regardless of how you're watching this, welcome here. We will send out updates on our mailing list. So if you're subscribed to our mailing list, you will get notified of upcoming webinars. And of course, you'll get a recording of this webinar. And of course, thank you to all of our clients who are on this call. We always appreciate any of our clients joining us on these things, as well as any potential clients. So as I said, what we're going to be talking about today is insurance, but three particular kinds of insurance, really. So the first is your homeowner's insurance, which covers your liability, hazard to the property, that sort of thing. Then we're going to talk about lost rent and eviction insurance, and then renter's insurance we'll cover real briefly because that's also relevant to landlords, of course. So let's start off with, what is landlord insurance? That's kind of the first big question. So a landlord insurance policy is really just a homeowner's insurance policy that's specifically designed for someone who owns a rental property. And the reason this is important is that if you just have a regular homeowner's insurance policy on your property, that doesn't really cover you if you have someone else renting the property. It's really only designed for you as an owner occupant. So what we're trying to make sure everybody's aware of is, because a lot of people just don't even know this is a thing, that there are separate kinds of policies depending on what you're using the house for. You need a special policy if you're renting the house out long-term, and you need a different policy if you're renting it out short-term. So, if you're doing like an Airbnb, now we don't manage those kind of properties, but just FYI, if you're watching this, there's a separate kind of policy you need for that. So you want to always make sure you got the right insurance policy for your house. So always make sure you talk to your insurance agent about that. Now, of course, landlord insurance, it covers all the same things that a regular homeowner's policy does. It's just for a rental property, but it covers all your things like natural disasters, fires, roof damage, if you've got a big storm that comes through. And the real big one is liability risk. That's the one that really comes in. It's not as big of a problem for a homeowner's policy if you live in the house. Still important, if a guest comes by, someone delivers a pizza, slips and falls, it matters. But, it matters a whole lot more when you've got people living in the house who are paying you to live there. So big part of this is about liability coverage. So, what are those potential liability risks? Well, of course, you've got potential injuries to tenants. That's obvious, but something people don't often think of is tenants also have guests over, and they can sue you just like a tenant can if they get injured on the property, and a vendor who comes out to the property. So if someone comes out to fix something at the property while a tenant lives there, that's a potential liability risk. One of the most common claims on an insurance policy is a dog bite claim. So that's something that's covered by liability coverage. So that's always an important one. And then, of course, like we mentioned, disasters, fires, explosions, flooding, all that kind of stuff. And I mentioned explosions because everybody always thinks of fires and flooding and that kind of stuff, but everybody forgets, especially if you've got gas at your house, there is always a potential risk of an actual explosion. And I've actually known for these things to occur to other property management companies where a house was literally flattened by an explosion from a gas line that caught fire. So all of this stuff is covered by landlord insurance. Zach, were you wanting to jump in there?
Yeah, I just want to say that's, I mean, it's the little things too. I've seen dog bites, and I've also seen tenants, guests getting hurt stepping on rotten back deck boards or front porch boards. And I mean, I've not heard of a landlord going to court for that and winning. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Excellent. Good info there. Well, that's actually a good segue. I'm talking about what insurance won't cover. So let's talk about that. What are some of the things that insurance will get denied for? So one thing that you will definitely get denied for on your insurance policy that a lot of people don't realize is damage caused by a tenant on move out. A lot of people have a misconception that a landlord homeowner's insurance policy is going to cover it if a tenant, let's say, hurts your hardwood floors, scuffs up the walls, and has to be repainted. That stuff is not covered under any policy I've ever seen. And of course, we should point out we're not an insurance brokerage. I'm not a licensed insurance agent, neither is Zach. This is just information that we are aware of as property managers. Always check with your insurance agent. But as far as I know, there are no policies to cover that sort of thing for tenants damaging a property. So your homeowner's policy almost certainly won't cover that sort of thing. Now, there are some policies that will cover what they call vandalism or malicious damage, where someone intentionally punches a hole in the wall, for example. So usually that's the sort of thing that is only going to get covered. Let's say you're evicting a tenant, they get really, really mad and they take a sledgehammer to the wall just because they're being evicted. That will usually be covered by a homeowner's policy. But if the tenant's just moving furniture around in the house, they scuff up the floors, punch a hole in the wall accidentally, that stuff doesn't get covered. So keep that in mind. When you have a turnover in between tenants, your insurance isn't really going to cover that. The other thing that insurance won't cover is any sort of liability for what they would consider gross negligence. And what that really means is if you don't do something that you should do in the insurance company's mind, then they're not going to cover it. So, a perfect example of this is if you refuse to get a repair done that you're supposed to do. So, let's say your HVAC system goes out in your house, you've got a tenant living there, it's 20 degrees in the middle of January, and someone gets sick because of that. You are going to be in big trouble. So not only is it illegal not to get the HVAC system fixed, but you could have a big liability mess on your hands because your insurance company won't cover you then. So that kind of stuff won't be covered. The other big liability thing that you want to keep in mind is if someone tells you about a problem and you don't do anything about it, that is considered negligence. So a primo example of this is a neighbor or your tenant reports that there's a dead tree in the backyard. And you say, you know what, no big deal. We'll just wait. We'll see what happens. And then if that tree falls, hurts somebody, worst case, kills somebody, then you're in really big trouble because you knew about it. If you didn't know anything about it, if nobody had said anything to you, you had no idea, your insurance will cover that sort of thing. But if somebody can show that you knew about this and you didn't do anything, that's called gross negligence. So that's why, as a property manager, we're here to keep you out of trouble. When someone reports something like that, we'll get it taken care of to keep you out of trouble. But those are the kind of things insurance doesn't cover. Zach, was there anything you wanted to go over on that?
No, I did, but I do want to kind of reinforce your point about heat in the wintertime. It's Georgia, but it still gets really cold. It is not safe to let your tenants or your guests, live without any heat in the wintertime.
Yeah, and I would also point out, it used to be in Georgia that really heat was the only thing that was talked about in the law. I mean, obviously it said you have to fix anything as a landlord. There's a warranty of repair. I think we've talked about that on these webinars before, but now they've specifically added to the law that air conditioning is a specific thing that a landlord is required to provide. So it's not just winter now, it's also, if it's July and it's 95 degrees outside, people are getting sick from heat stroke. Now you could be in trouble for that. So same sort of situation. Okay, so let's talk about why inspections matter here. So insurers for your homeowner's insurance have exclusions for all kinds of things. So it's always important for you to actually look at the fine print on your policy and see what things aren't covered. But it's usually things like trampolines, skateboard ramps, play sets, sometimes even water beds. There's a lot of things that insurers can say, if you have these on the property, we're not covering you. So they're specifically telling you you're not allowed to have them in the house. So we got to make sure that we're compliant with the policy as far as those things go. And for that reason, inspections are important, because that's really the only way. If you're not living there, then the only way to be sure that these things aren't at the house is to have somebody inspecting it on some sort of regular basis. So as a property management company, for our clients, what we do is we inspect at least once a year. Now, we also have tenants do quarterly inspections where they have to snap photos of everything at the house. So we get a view of it every 3 months, but we actually go out to the house every year to make sure that nobody's hiding anything from us. So, that's very important, because if we go out to the house and we find that someone has put up a skateboard ramp in the backyard, that's a big problem. So we need to find out about those sorts of things. So always make sure, number one, when you leave and you rent out the property, take these things off the property. If you had a play set there, if you had an above ground pool, whatever the case may be, get rid of them. And then we need to make sure that the tenants don't put anything in there. Anything to add to that, Zach?
Absolutely. Just another great reason to consider hiring a property management company. Maybe us, but there is your regular everyday landlord may or may not know the rules, but you can't just roll up and go into your backyard and essentially, you can't trespass while the tenants are living there. Not everyone knows that. You own the place, you think you can go there at your convenience. You cannot. We do these inspections in accordance with the lease agreement. We give them plenty of notice. It's scheduled, and it's a very nice report. Similar if you're going to buy something, but not so much focus on the report, but they do look for things that could get you in trouble. Trampolines, play sets, unapproved pets, things like that. So
no, that's unapproved pets, a perfect example. I forgot to put that on the list, but that's a great thing to point out, because you can't obviously do anything to make sure that you're compliant with your insurance policy if you're not checking to make sure that the pets there are compliant. Because I mean, some insurance policies will say you can't have these kind of dogs at the property, for example. So you got to be checking for those sorts of things. So always keep that in mind.
that kind of circles back to what you were saying about one of the most common claims being animal bites, dog bites.
Yep, definitely. So let's talk about, since we're talking about lawsuits and potential liability, let's talk about how those lawsuits work and why you should worry about these sorts of things and why insurance is important to take those worries away. When someone files a lawsuit over a rental property, in general, they're just filing a blanket lawsuit on everybody they can possibly think of. So that means you as the property owner are going to be sued. Even if you've got a property manager, the primary person that they're going to sue is actually the owner of the property, because they figure that's who they're going to be able to get the most bang for their buck out of, because they can always put a lien on your house if they get a judgment against you. So they want to sue you. They're going to sue the property management company also, most likely. That'll happen. And they can also name vendors. So let's say that they're suing you over something that was repair related. They'll name the vendor also who did the work. They can name all kinds of people. You never know who they can come up with. I've seen lawyers name all kinds of crazy parties to a lawsuit. So that's why it's so important to make sure that you got your insurance handled, because if you've got coverage, you got it set up right, you've done everything you're supposed to do, then they will make sure that regardless of who gets named, you're protected. So everybody else can worry about their insurance, as far as your vendor and all that kind of stuff, but make sure that you've got the property properly insured. And the property manager needs to be named as additionally insured if you're using a property manager. Um, that is extremely important. We'll dig into that a little bit more here in a second, but that's something that a lot of people overlook, and that's very important to do just because of how these lawsuits work. So make sure you've got that taken care of. And the other thing is you only want to use fully insured vendors to work on your house. That is a big thing that people frequently, and this is, by the way, this is good advice for your house you live in, not just for your rental property. A lot of people don't realize if you own a house, you live there, you hire a handyman to come out who doesn't have insurance and he slips and falls off the roof, you're going to be in big trouble because your insurance isn't going to cover that because you hired someone who didn't have insurance. And your insurance policy specifically requires you to use only vendors who have workers' comp insurance. So very important you make sure this is all covered when lawsuits come calling. Remember, your insurance company is going to look for any possible reason to make sure that they don't have to pay this claim. That's how insurance companies make money. You pay them money and they figure out ways not to pay it back to you. That's how insurance works. So always keep that in mind. Zach, anything to name about or anything to mention on that before we kind of get into the details of naming your property manager?
Just one little bit. That's why you always want to use a property management company for stuff like that. If you have tenants, we do not play around. All of our vendors are licensed and insured. And for our owners, some of our owners want to do the work themselves or use their friend, and it's just not acceptable unless they have, unless they're insured and licensed. We won't work with them.
Yep, excellent point. All right, so let's get into the details of why naming your property manager as additional insured is important. And I apologize, I now see that I have a misspelling here. Sorry about that. Revolution and any sort of reputable property management company is going to require that you name them as additionally insured on your insurance policy. And a lot of people don't understand why this is. The simple reason for this is the property manager doesn't own the house. So this all comes down to what a insurance company considers what they call an insurable interest in the property. So there are some policies like life insurance, for example, you can take out a life insurance policy on just about anybody as long as you have their basic information. That's allowed. But when it comes to something like a car, a house, a boat, anything like that, you can't just insure anybody's house. You know, I can't place an insurance policy on Zach's house in hopes that it's going to burn down someday and I'm going to get a payout. That's not how it works. You know, I have to actually own the property that I'm trying to take out a policy on. So as a property manager, we're not able to have insurance on your house. So we have to have some sort of coverage for that liability issue. We don't need to be covered, you know, if your house burns down and it needs to be rebuilt. We just need to be covered if you get sued over something related to that house. So in order for us to get that coverage, because we don't have an insurable interest in the house, you have to name us as additional insured, and that will cover us. Most insurers, this is just no big deal. It doesn't cost you any extra. In fact, sometimes they'll actually give you a discount because you're using a property manager. There are some insurance companies who actually bump down your premium on a landlord policy because they're happy to see you've got a professional managing the property. But I've never seen a case where an insurance policy increased in price to name a property manager as additional insured. Now, one thing I will say is while most insurance companies have no problem with this, we are constantly butting heads with Allstate because they don't want to name property managers additional insured. I don't know what their deal is, but they don't do it. We've gone back and forth with a million different agents on it. It's just a problem. So, you know, if you use Allstate for your insurance, I would recommend if you're going to have a rental property professionally managed, seek out a different insurer. Now, we have a partnership with a company called Obie. If you need to get coverage, Obie's an insurance provider who specializes in landlord insurance policies for rental properties. And they are all set up to take care of this. They usually can give you a discounted price over what you would get from most other insurers, and they will automatically name your property manager's additional insured. So no problems there. Zach, anything to add there?
I am glad you brought up Allstate. I could rant about it. I will spare everybody. But Yeah, I wish they'd get with the program. They are the only one who will not do it. And then just to touch on price a little bit, I've never, ever, ever seen something cost more for changing over to a landlord policy. I get asked that all the time, and I confidently tell them no. So just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Because I mean, that is something a lot of people worry about. They think, you're going to make me name you as additional insured. What's this going to cost me? And nothing. It's not going to cost anything at all.
Nope.
Um, Now, at this point, I'm going to throw it over to Zach because I want him to cover a specific story that we have, I think, from about a year ago from an owner who did not get insurance on their property. So, Zach, could you kind of go through that and give people an example of why this is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were managing a house. I signed it up as a business development manager, and this was about 1 year ago. And we were, I'm not really looped in on what goes in the back end, but I know the staff was trying to get a policy from her because if we don't have it, all these alarm bells start going off in the system, and it's, it, she should have gotten it. Let me put it like that. But anyways, it was kind of the slow season. It was rainy, it was cold, it was winter, and it took us a while, but we placed a tenant in her property in Metro Atlanta. And that weekend, the tenant was moving in. It was moving day. A tree fell from the tree line into the property. It's not a big property. It's a 3-2. It was a 3-2 ranch, and this tree went inside of the house, just absolutely let itself into the through the wall, through the siding, through all the materials, and it was exposing the rest of the house to the elements. I mean, this was a huge repair, 10, $15,000 if I remember correctly. This particular homeowner did not have any insurance, not a homeowner's policy, not a landlord policy, and she had to pay for the whole thing. Um, and the house was no longer habitable. We could not let a tenant live in there with exposed wires and a tree. We got rid of the tree and they patched it, but um, yeah, I would just learning that lesson the hard way. That was her whole income for that property for the entire year. Um, and yeah, it was just a shame. Insurance would have paid for it. It would have been a claim. So better have it and not need it than to need it and not have it is a good saying.
Yeah, I mean, this is one. I mean, for the average homeowner, I mean, they probably would have had $1,000 deductible, is my best guess as to what the average client that we have would have had on this. That's all it would have cost this landlord, and unfortunately, instead, it ended up being like Zach said, it was like $13,000 or something like this. I was actually just emailing this owner earlier today because her payment is due this month towards her bills because we've been offering a payment plan to her. She's been paying this off now for a year, just paying a little bit every month, and she still owes, I think, about $700, $800 on those repairs. So I mean, she's still a year later trying to get this paid down. So perfect example of how this can go sideways just because you think, oh, I'll save a little money, not get the property insured. Well, she didn't save any money. She's basically paying 7, 8 years worth of insurance premiums.
And we had the place rented. Like it was so close to producing income for this owner. Like it was the first day we had moving funds. The ball was rolling in the right direction. So instead of it's yeah, it's it's not just money lost. It's a lot of money lost.
Yeah,
Money
you
not
just hate to see something like this because it's completely avoidable. I mean,
Mhm.
there was no reason for this to happen, and I mean, we don't force people to get insurance. I mean, our contract says they're required to have it, and we charge an extra fee if they don't get it, so that we are able to get coverage for us. If we have to, but we're not going to tell someone you've got to insure your property if you don't want to. So, I mean, she was just in that situation. We had sent a reminder after reminder after reminder telling her to do this, and she just didn't do it. And this is the outcome. So,
I think for some of our out of state owners, who maybe don't know how many trees Georgia has, but there are trees all over the place. I've lived in Georgia my whole life, so it's just standard business to me. But I've talked to people before who are visiting and traveling, and family friends, and they're like, oh, there's a lot of trees here. I've never seen this before. So yeah, I mean, they're in neighborhoods. They get old, they die, they fall. It's Georgia. It is a liability. A tree could fall onto your property in Georgia. So
Yep.
that's my 2 cents on it.
And yeah, for like Zach said, for those out of state owners, not only are there trees everywhere, but this isn't like, the Northwest where you got these big, thick,
No,
evergreen trees. These are these little thin pine trees that'll
got
snap
some
like a
pine
twig.
trees, and they'll
Yeah.
fall, and they will fall into your house. So
Happens every single time a storm comes through. We see trees down every time. So you just got to take this seriously, folks. Okay, so that's homeowners insurance or landlord homeowners insurance. Next, what we want to cover is lost rent and eviction insurance. So this is a completely different kind of insurance product. Your landlord insurance will not cover lost rent or eviction expenses. So if you've got a normal homeowner's policy, a landlord policy, there's going to be no coverage for that. One exception to this is if your property like gets burnt down, for example, your insurance policy may have what they call business interruption coverage, which basically means you were supposed to be getting rent income on this house. Now you're not getting it. So they'll pay you the rent in that case that you lost. But that's only if the house is destroyed. That's the only time that comes into play. Just in general, if a tenant stops paying the rent or they skip out early, you got no coverage for that sort of thing. Or you've got no coverage for legal fees if you have to evict a tenant. So what we've done is we've gone out and we found a way to protect our clients from this through what we call our owner benefits package, which includes an insurance product to help owners with this. So Zach, you pitch this all the time. So I'm going to throw this over to you. Why don't you tell everybody what that owner benefits package looks like?
Oh, it's one of my favorite things to speak about when I'm selling our services or when I'm speaking about our services. Like Todd said, insurance companies can't offer these types of guarantees, but we can. 36. Well, I think it's actually gone to different pricing tiers, but what it offers is a lot of peace of mind, a lot of security. What you get is 2 months lost rent guarantee. If your tenant leaves you owing money, we can recover up to 2 months in lost rent. It takes, I don't know, probably a few weeks to actually get a check from this. But I've seen behind the scenes, I've seen this pay out. I know a lot of landlords who wish they would have had a lost rent guarantee who did not. And we actually offer on one of our premium plans, we offer an additional 2 months. So up to 4 months lost rent guarantee could come in handy. Hopefully you don't need it, but it's there if you do. Pest control for mice and rats. It's Georgia. It may not happen to you, but it could happen. Things will crawl under your house, under the soffit, into the siding, into the vents, into the attics. There's mice, rats. There's critters here. If you're from Georgia, So it may not be a problem, but if it is, if it happens, it's a landlord responsibility. So if you do get something that crawls under the crawl space and dies and you can't find it, or it's, an actual issue or we need to have some removal done, you cannot make your tenant pay for that. And not everyone knows that, but it's a landlord responsibility. So we got you covered via our owner benefits package. Fraudulent listing detection. I think this is new, but I really like it. I've seen a lot of scammy posts, I've seen a couple of ours, but I've also seen I've heard a lot of horror stories about people getting ripped off at houses and paying, thousands of dollars to someone in cash, and they give them the key, and then before you know it, the police department's there. So I love to see that. Illegal subletting detection. As a landlord, you want to know who's in your property. Um, it's you don't want your tenant subletting, Airbnb the property, doing something they're not supposed to do. They only need to live there and pay rent on time and keep reasonable care of the property. So renting out rooms or spaces or the whole place, that's not allowed, and you don't want it, and we don't want it. Reduce commission on a sale. Not a huge deal. Not a huge, it's 1% usually, but that's 1% on your 250, $300,000 property. That's a few grand that you could save. Um, we've been in business 16 years. We absolutely know how to handle a sales transaction. If we do a good job with your property and you like what we've done, we'd love to list it for you. Um, and let me see, lump sum payment. This is a cool one. It's not for everybody. Long story short, once we have a signed lease and a tenant moving in, as long as we screen this tenant, our company did, and we're putting them on one of our leases. Uh, Another insurance company we partner with, not Obie, but Steady. Uh, Steady is going to connect with you, and they're going to offer to pay you a lump sum of the rent that you would have collected for the year. They do get a percentage, small percent, I think it's 6%, for giving you this lump sum payment. But if anything happens with the tenants, you don't have to give it back. So it's not for everybody. You're missing out on that 6% of your annual if you do it. But it could be good if your margins, I mean, if you've owned the property for a while and you don't have a huge mortgage to pay, and I've seen investors take advantage of it. Uh I've seen someone take advantage of it, and I've seen some high-end clients take advantage of it. They'll take that lump sum payment and they're just sleeping better at night. They're not worried if their tenant is going to pay rent on the first, or if they're working, because they've already received their money for the year. So a lot of value in our owner benefits package.
Excellent, excellent, very good. Lots and lots of value there. And by the way, that owner benefits package is only $36. We're actually, like Zach mentioned, we're about to come out with a few different tiers of that here in the new year. But for now, that's what that is. I mean, you're getting all of that for $36 a month. So very, very cheap coverage.
If
Um,
if your tenant leaves with the balance, it will pay for itself.
Oh yeah, definitely, definitely. And we've had multiple clients have claims filed under this policy and get paid out. So like Zach mentioned, takes about a month, thereabouts to get your check. But those owners are very happy when they get that check after they've had someone evicted or skip out.
That's right.
Okay. Last thing we'll cover today is renter's insurance. And you may think this doesn't matter to you as a landlord, but I can assure you it definitely does. It's important to you. Even though you're not the one buying it, making sure the tenant has it is very important. And the reason for that is a tenant can cause you a liability issue. So the perfect example of this is what both Zach and I mentioned earlier, which is dog bites, which happen so often. But I mean, there's also other examples. We've seen a tenant burn down a kitchen before. They started a grease fire. The kitchen was just gutted. It was a mess. That's a tenant liability issue. The tenant caused the damage. So, it wasn't like the house got struck by lightning. It wasn't an act of God. It was something the tenant did. So that's their fault. It's their liability. So if the tenant has a renter's insurance policy like they should, then your insurance company will be able to what they call subrogate, which basically means your insurance company goes to the tenant's insurance company and says, hey, your client was responsible for this. You need to reimburse our client. So, they take care of it that way so that you're not covering the cost. And the important thing is, if your insurer isn't covering the cost, they aren't going to hurt you with an increased premium because it's not really your claim. It's the tenant's claim really at that point. So, that's why this is important. You're protecting yourself by making sure the tenant has it. So having that policy with the tenant is going to cover you, but it's also going to do something to help the tenant because it covers their property from damage. So let's say the house floods, and we actually had this happen. This house in Fayetteville years ago, where a tenant's washer, the back of it, the connector on it, failed, flooded the house while they were out on vacation, and this was an upstairs laundry room. Terrible idea, by the way. I know it's convenient when you've got upstairs bedrooms, but terrible idea from a damage perspective. Floods the house, comes down the living room, or excuse me, the kitchen was underneath it, ruined all the hardwood floors. It was a complete gut. It was like 40, 50, $60,000 worth of damage. Um, Making sure that the tenant has that policy to cover you is important, but also that tenant, their furniture was all destroyed, their clothes were all destroyed. What you don't want is that tenant to come to you and say, hey, I expect you to pay for this because I was living in your house and something bad happened and now I have no couch or clothes or whatever. You can tell them, oh, no, 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 no. Your lease said you're required to have insurance. So that's your responsibility. Go to your insurance company and get reimbursed for your damage. So that's why it's important to have this. It protects you if the tenant does something, and it protects the tenant if that sort of situation happens. So for Revolution, we have an insured tenant guarantee, which basically says if we place the tenant, we're making sure they have renter's insurance. And we do that through something very similar to the owner benefits package. We have a resident benefits package where the tenant gets insurance through our insurance package. We have what's called a master insurance policy that basically covers every tenant. So we don't have to worry about it. Every tenant is insured. They can get their own insurance if they want. You know, if they like their insurance better, let's say they got USAA or something, they really love their insurance company, they can submit that, prove that they've got it, and they can keep that insurance. But I'm pretty sure every single one of the tenants that we have right now is on our insurance plan. So it gives us peace of mind. It gives you as the landlord peace of mind, and it protects the tenant who might not be responsible enough to make the right decision and get themselves some insurance. So we're just making sure that that's taken care of. Any thoughts on that, Zach?
It's probably the tenant's washing machine anyways. That's it. 9 times out of 10, I don't know, maybe not that frequently, but it's usually the tenant's washing machine. I have seen that more than once. People moving or moving washing machines around, and they pull a hose, or they hit a pipe and they yank something out and it floods the entire floor. I've seen it at least 3 or 4 times. So it happens.
Yep. Yeah. These things, people think these things are super rare. And I mean, I guess in the grand scheme of things, they are kind of rare. I mean, we manage hundreds of properties and we've seen these a few times. But the problem is, if it's you that it happens to, you don't care how rare it is. You know, the fact that it only happens 2% of the time doesn't matter if you're one of the 2%. It's a life-changing problem for you. So, you know,
it happened to Tamara, and she's right there. I don't know if she wants to, she said no, but it did happen to Tamara in this house. It was right up there, and it was a upstairs washer and dryer unit, and flooded the entire upstairs, and we had to pull the carpet out of all the bedrooms, and it was a nightmare. And thankfully, I guess kind of she said it flooded downstairs too. Moral of the story is she was able to file a claim. She wasn't a landlord, but she did not skimp on the insurance, is my point.
Yep. Very, very important. People underestimate the importance of insurance all the time. So, well, fantastic. Well, that is it. It doesn't look like we had any questions submitted during the webinar today. So I think we've pretty much covered everything. We, of course, will have another webinar coming up here on next quarter. So thank you, everybody, for attending today. Of course, just our quick summary. Remember, we are not insurance agents. We're not an insurance company. So, of course, always go to your licensed insurance agent and get the most up-to-date information. We always defer to them, and that's why we use insurance companies like Obie and Steady to handle these things, because they're the experts. We're just here to give you some information from our perspective, but make sure you talk to your insurance agent. Don't forget to name your property manager as additional insured, always important. And make sure your tenants are insured. Always remember all these things. So our next webinar will be in March, probably late in March. We'll have an announcement coming out. If you're not on our email list, if you weren't on our email list before, because you joined the webinar today, you will be. So don't worry about that. We'll have you on our email list. We'll send out that update with what the next webinar is going to be about and the exact date so you can get signed up for it. And of course, everybody who signed up for today's webinar will get an email here in the next week or two with a copy of the video for this. so that if you missed anything, you'll be able to get that, or if you need to go back and refer to it, you'll be able to do that. So hope everybody got some good information out of this. Hope everybody had a good Christmas and you have a happy new year. And we will see everybody in March for our next webinar. Thanks, everybody.
See you later. Thank you very much.